On both my channels, people were very interested to hear about the book I recently finished. So yeah, as I've said before, writing is a hobby of mine. I've already written a couple books in the genres of fantasy, science fiction, and thriller, and I recently found out that you can actually self-publish books on Amazon. You guys seem to be interested in the thriller part, and that is the one I most recently finished, so that one is a go. First, let's start with the title. I'm planning on either calling it Red Flag or Rogue Flag. Let me know which one you think is better. Next, we have the setting. What is the book about? The story takes place in the near future, in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic. The world is in a new Cold War. Ireland, Malta, Finland, and Sweden renounce neutrality and join NATO, something that infuriates Russia. On the other side of the world, most of the manufacturing sector has been removed from China and spreads across Southeast Asia and Central Asia, which is why China is even more bent on controlling the South China Sea, so that way they can tax all the trade that goes through there. Yeah, I made a video on that topic a while back, something that increases tension between China and the West as well. In response, Russia and China form a tighter alliance, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO, becomes more militarized. The whole world is stuck in the midst of another Iron Curtain. This angers a lot of citizens who don't want to be part of these tensions, and then some of them give in to a new brand of populism. That introduces us to the antagonist of the book, Nelson Fraser. He is an Irish far-right politician who decides to go form his own micronation on Nestoria, a fictional 18-square-kilometer island in the Barents Sea that is unclaimed by any nation. But in order to solidify his nation's power, he steals nuclear warheads from 4 of the UN Security Council members and buys an old Soviet nuclear submarine, a hotel-class vessel, from an ex-Russian admiral. This pushes tensions to the edge on both sides, as each of them think that they have stolen the other's weapons. Our protagonist is G2 operative Connor O'Hara, who is part of NATO's special intelligence unit that is called Sentinel. His deputies are Mark Cole from CSIS and Chloe Dorsey from DGSC. They have been called up to find the whereabouts of the missing nukes before this Cold War turns into a hot war, one that might have 3 nuclear-armed sides. Now, what do you guys think? Would you like to hear the basic outline of the plot? If you hate spoilers, I suggest you skip to this stamp to hear the final word. If you'd like to hear it, well, listen on. So the book begins in Siberia, where Nelson Fraser is starting to pick up the pieces he needs to form his own country. He is accompanied by several henchmen who want to be citizens of his nation and hundreds of millions of stolen euros. Along with him is an American called Alan Strives. While in the dark wilderness, he meets up with Yuri Novitsky, a Ukrainian arms dealer, who provides him with the American, French, and Russian nukes. Along the way, he also meets the Soviet submarine he ordered and his crew, all of whom are people who seek life on Fraser's new micronation. With the submarine, they travel to Hong Kong, where they reach the Green Dragon, a small triad that stole the Chinese warheads for Fraser as well. Just as they are about to depart, Fraser shoots Alan Strives, revealing that he was a CIA intelligence officer that whole time, intent on selling them out. Now, being completely free, they set course to the Barents Sea. Later on, O'Hara, Mark, and Chloe are summoned to a Sentinel Black site, along with a CIA station chief named Chris Grives. The deputy director of the CIA, Irene Walsh, also tells them that the nuclear warheads have been stolen and their CIA officer Alan Strives has gone missing. The West initially believes that Russia and China are responsible, but O'Hara believes that it is Novitsky who stole the warheads for his own gain, but his superiors believe otherwise. Nevertheless, Novitsky is added as a secondary objective. Chris is sent to China to investigate the disappearance of Alan Strives, while O'Hara and his station are ordered to monitor Russia. To go through with their mission, they first head to Chittagong in Bangladesh and convince Dima Volodyev, a former advisor to the Russian president who is trying to live off the grid, to become the mole in the Kremlin once again. And it is impeccable timing, as the Russian president is calling all his former advisors to Moscow. O'Hara and his station stay in Finland while Dima meets with his old colleagues. There they learn that it is not the Russians and the Chinese that have stolen Western nukes, and in fact some of their nukes have been stolen as well. That is when Nowitzki becomes the top priority once again, but he has gone underground and NATO intelligence is unable to locate him for a few weeks. Inside those few weeks, Frozar and his group of separatists settle on their island, which they call Nostoria. They build huts, establish a government, a military, a somewhat economy, and most importantly, an internet presence which helps them with their appearance. They garner even more hits as they establish diplomatic ties with other micronations, such as Seborga, Somaliland, Sealand, and the Conch Republic. That is how word of his nation spreads. Meanwhile, luck hits O'Hara's crew as he finally receives word from Dima. The Russians have figured out that the perpetrator who stole their nukes used a prototype of a computer virus to hack into Russian systems. The virus was developed by Tarkov Services, a Russian private military corporation. After doing an even more thorough analysis, they find out that Tarkov's CEO has received millions of dollars in payment from a fake Ukrainian politician's account, which Dima instantly recognizes as Nowitzki's. The Russian government, on the other hand, believe that it is the Ukrainian government that instigated the attack, and they prepare to send an ultimatum to Kiev, which would definitely result in war since they don't have the nukes. Dima sends information and the computer virus sample to O'Hara, where they make sense of everything. Nowitzki made a deal with Tarkov to steal the nukes from the US, France, Russia, while Chris finds out that it is the Green Dragon, a Hong Kong-based trad who stole the Chinese warheads for Frozar as well. Still, Nowitzki is in hiding, and NATO is unable to locate him. However, Sierra O'Hara, who just so happens to be Connor's wife, leads a cyber warfare team in tracking all top-secret Tarkov operations. They learn that a small contingent of contractors are based in Tasmania in Australia. Chloe has contacts in ASIS, the Australian intelligence agency, and after some investigation, they find out that Nowitzki is indeed hiding in the Tasmanian jungle. O'Hara, Mark, and Chloe travel to Australia with NATO operatives, and together with ASIS, they storm the hideout, kill all the contractors, and then they interrogate Nowitzki, who tells them that Frozar was the one who orchestrated the whole thing. Meanwhile, the Russian parliament is ready to declare war on Ukraine, and Dima meets with the leaders of the opposition in order to stop the Duma from giving the Russian president command of the military. The opposition foolishly leaks the theft of the nuclear weapons to the media, which starts a purging campaign. He exposes himself as a Western asset after saving his daughter Lashnia, who is an opposition party member, and he gets into a gunfight with the FSB and the Moscow police, which sadly results in his death while giving time for his daughter to escape. Because of, their stolen nukes, Russia sees this act of aggression and begins withdrawing diplomatic personnel from many Western nations. As if this is not enough, General Zhang, one of China's ruthless generals, is put in charge of the SCO's battle groups, and he places the whole PLA under its control. And he follows through with its posturing. As both sides prepare for war, O'Hara and Chris return to Walsh with proof that this was all Frozar's doing. U.S. Navy helicopters fly towards Nostoria and engage in a small air battle with the tiny nation's gyrocopters, which are armed with machine guns. Frozar then fires a nuclear torpedo from his submarine at an uninhabited area of Greenland and publicly admits to the world on social media that he indeed is the one who stole the warheads and will fire nuclear missiles at any nation that attempts to invade the island. This puts a thaw in this second Cold War tensions, but only for one day, as both sides amass their fleets on both sides of the island as a show of strength to Nostoria. Negotiations over the stolen nukes fall silent, and it leads to a stalemate between three sides. O'Hara, Chris, and their teams covertly infiltrate the island, and each group is tasked with either finding the means of communication with the submarine or where it might be located. O'Hara, Mark, and Chloe lead their group to the armory, where they find data on Nostoria's nuclear capabilities, as well as the basement where their nuclear stockpile is. However, only 4 crates are in the basement, which shows that their intel was off and that the remaining nukes are stored elsewhere. Just as they are about to leave, Frozer shows up with some of his armed guards, having known about the team's arrival this whole time. He then tells them that he wants NATO and the SCO to wipe each other out so that he can solidify himself as the dominant power in the world, which basically shows that he is a deranged lunatic. His henchmen then kill a number of GRU troops outside who are doing the same thing as the NATO operatives, and he leaves O'Hara and later Chris in the open to make it look like they were the ones who attacked the Russians. The GRU investigate the armory themselves and find their nukes nowhere in sight. And because NATO operatives attacked them, they presume the West has come to steal their nukes. Chris dies in the chase while O'Hara and his group narrowly escape the island. In order to solidify his false flag operation, Frozer orders his submarine to fire torpedoes at both the NATO and SCO fleets, which causes a naval battle in the Barents Sea. O'Hara, Mark, and Chloe flee to Norway and are summoned to the NATO Communications and Information Agency headquarters, where they realize that World War III has started as a result of their failures. Russia invades Finland, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, while China and North Korea attack South Korea and raid US and allied military bases in the Pacific in an attempt to search for their nukes. Both of them are so keen on finding their stolen nukes that they are willing to actually invade their opponent, and at the same time they intend on pursuing their nationalistic plans, such as reintegrating Russians who live outside Russia and capturing key economic areas vital to China. As a result, O'Hara and his team are taken off the case and will head home once the report is done. Although he continues to try persuading Walsh to let him back in, he is denied every single time. Frozer's submarine must be found so that they can end the war. That desire becomes even more dire after Russia and China invade Alaska. Meanwhile, Russian sleeper cells all over Europe attack NATO facilities and bases in order to look for their stolen nukes, including the NCI agency. O'Hara rallies the armed security personnel and the handful amount of US troops there to defend the building and hold the Russians long enough until the Dutch military arrives to save them. As a result of his heroic actions, O'Hara and his station crew are put back on the case and are sent to Alaska, as through signal interception they discover that Frozer's units plan to stow away on bombers and falsely launch a nuclear attack with a few stolen Russian warheads. Upon arriving in Alaska, they learn that the battle there has turned into a frozen conflict, with the Kremlin threatening the West with a nuclear strike if they try to retake occupied Alaska. Instead, the Allies support an insurgency in order to fight the invasion. O'Hara's group split, and they each go in with covert U.S. Army Rangers into the occupied zone to meet up with civilian resistance fighters. They each attack the Russian bomber bases, but do not find the stolen nukes there. Shortly after that, they realize that the Russians and Chinese are sharing weapons for their bombing raids over Canada and the Pacific. Frozer was one step ahead of them again. He was placing the nukes on a Chinese bomber this whole time. In order to react quickly, O'Hara orders Mark to contact the Canadian government and warn them about the attack. They succeed after the Canadian military shoots down all 5 Chinese bombers. Some of the stolen nukes are found, which calls for a peace summit. Frozer, who is now angry that his plan didn't work, reacts emotionally and fires his own nuclear missiles at the US and Europe. In a last-ditch attempt to combat the attack, the West activates its space-based missile defenses, which involve satellites that emit a wall of microwaves. Everyone is amazed that the defenses work, and best of all, they locate Nestoria's submarine, which is basically exposed itself. They sink the submarine in the North Atlantic and make plans to lift the wreck to recover the remaining warheads. Nestoria is then occupied by US Marines since they no longer have a deterrent, and Frozer, who is now reviled by his own government, goes into hiding. Things seem to go nicely, but at the peace summit, the two sides cannot agree on peace terms. As a result, the war continues. The book ends with the main characters mourning the loss over their fallen comrades, as in the distance, Walsh walks towards them, seemingly for a new mission. Well, that is the book, so what do you guys think? Would it be interesting? I'm still learning how to work Amazon Kindle self-publishing, but as soon as that's ready and once my friend is done with the illustrations, I'll be ready to publish this book as one of my first 2 ultimate novels. Let me know if you want to know more about my books.